This program is brought to you by 3C Like what you learned? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up on the latest 3C programs.
My name is James Howell. I was born here in Porterville. My father had the theater business here, and I grew up in the theater. I was, at the time the war broke out, I was assistant manager at the theater we had called the Molino Theater. I also played for dances. I played the trumpet, and had the idea that maybe I would send in to get into the Navy School of Music, because I didn't want to be drafted and be in the Army. Not anything wrong with the Army, but my father was in the Navy and I wanted to be in the Navy too. Anyway, I played a bad dance. I mean, it was a hard job. That Sunday morning, I opened the Molino Theater and went in and got the theater going, and I turned on the radio, and it came on that Honolulu had been bombed by the Japanese. That did it. And I said, I don't want to go and play my trumpet. I want to go do something better than that. So after a couple of weeks of planning, we went over and signed up and enlisted. Had to go to Visalia that day. And it took almost a month before they called me. We went up, and I had a friend named Richard Pratt. He and I joined together. We thought go together, stay together. We signed up at Visalia. We had to go to San Francisco to be signed in officially. Then they sent us back home, and then we had to go back to San Francisco to get a train to go to San Diego to go to boot camp. Well, Richard and I separated in San Diego because he got in a different boot camp and I got in the boot camp. And they gave me a test, and they said, well, I think you could be a sonar. Well, I didn't know what in the world. At that time, I think most people called them soundmen. So I went to 6 months training in San Diego. And Richard, he got in the Signal Corps, and he went another way, and I never saw him again after I got to San Diego.
Where did you serve when you were finally trained?
Well, after that, I got to San Francisco, the old Treasure Island out there, as the head of the Navy, and I had to go there and wait for my assignment. I was there for about a week, and then they assigned me to a ship called the USS Barker, a destroyer. I got on the ship as the Barker had been in Manila or in the Philippines when the war started, and it had fought its way down and had an engagement with the Japanese, but it got down to Australia and got fixed up some of the things that were damaged, and then they sent it back to San Francisco to be renewed, and they made it from a four-stacker, an old four-stacker destroyer, to a three-stacker destroyer. And that was at the Navy Yard in Mare Island. Anyway, from that's past. Then the main part of the war that I fought, we went over to the Atlantic and did some convoy duty to Africa. and up and down the states and Atlantic, all over the Atlantic. And then they had a baby flat top carrier. And it wasn't a regular sized airplane carrier, it was a ship that was made into a carrier. Had just a few airplanes on it. And we went out to get rid of the German subs that had been around there.
Hold that thought for just a moment. I'm going to ask Mr. Denver Tape to pick up and tell us a little bit about him. Would you like to take a microphone and expound?
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Denver Tate, retired Air Force, 22 years, and now with the California Military Department. I'm here today representing the career, which I was in 1953. In fact, the day that the ceasefire was declared, I just turned 20 years old. Was happy because I was going home in a couple of 3 weeks. From there, Vietnam is being represented here also. I spent a couple of tours in Vietnam in the Air Force as a crew chief on a 2-engine cargo aircraft, just transporting people, Vietnamese, farmers, pigs, chickens, Army, Marines, whatever. All we needed was 500 feet of dirt and we could get in and out. So, born in Arkansas, moved to California in 1938 here at Porterville, went to school here, joined the Air Force in 1951.
Thank you.
Let's look at the watch. Okay, it's not quite afternoon yet, so good morning. My name is Carl Borges. I was born in Oakland, California. Most of my time was spent in Fresno and Clovis area, mainly Clovis, where I retired from the city of Clovis. And married 27 years, got divorced, and that's when I met my wife here in Porterville. And I've been married now roughly just about 2 years. And I have lived in Porterville, though, I'm going to say almost 5 years. And I was with the U.S. Navy Special Forces, spent 3 tours over in Vietnam, 5 years total service, 1.5 years of sea duty. At the time, I was stationed on a cargo attack ship, and my first tour was during the Battle of Hue, taking cargo and supplies 12 miles up the Song Hong River, which was very treacherous and very dangerous. And after that was over, about 1.5 years of sea duty, I was also, let me go back. During the sea duty, I also came over and got transferred to a LFR, which is a landing flotilla rocket ship. This little ship was only 200 and something feet long. Wasn't very big, but it had the firepower of 7 destroyers. We had 8 launchers that would shoot 2 rockets out at a time. During general quarters, my job, which the captain at the time said, I want nobody but Borges on that helm, steering the ship. That was my job during general quarters. Okay, after that, I got my basically sea duty, which they said was done. So I got transferred over to Coronado, California, which is the Special Forces section of the Beach Jumper Unit 1, which is stationed over there in Coronado, right off the beach here. And went through the training when everything with SEALs, UDTs, the whole bit. 4 o'clock, treading through water in the ocean and everything. All kinds of different things. I'm not going to go through that, but this was the treacherous part of Vietnam. It really was. A lot of people say, you know, Vietnam was a war that the U.S. basically lost, but my explanation to this is, how can you lose a war when you're not there? Let me explain. It first started out in the early 60s. Vietnam went on up until 1971, basically when we pulled all of our troops out. 1975, the communists took over Saigon and Vietnam became communism. At that time, during 1975, we were gone. We were out of there. How can you lose a war when you're not there? So that's where this came from. And Vietnam, my job during that time was sniper. And the type of beach jumper job opportunities at that time was paratroopers with electronic warfare. What we do is we set up a position in the jungles. In Vietnam, mostly was jungle fighting period. Very similar to World War II fighting, and everything was jungle over there basically. So that's what it was, and we set up electronic warfare, simulating a war and everything. I spent 3 tours over there, and that's just about it, you know. If anybody has any questions later on, I'll be happy to ask them.
Thank you.
Answer them, that is, not ask them.
Hi everyone, like you said, my name is Maria Villalobos, and I was part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was deployed for 3.5 years, and I spent most of my time, was supposed to be a supply sergeant. Hardly ever did that job, because you have to do everything. I enlisted when I was 18. I had just turned 18. My parents had to sign the contract, but then we found out it wasn't really necessary because I was going to turn 18 by the time I went to basic training. And I went with in a buddy system. We decided to join because of what happened in 9/11, and also because we wanted to travel. We never really thought we were going to be going to war. At least that's not what went through my mind. I thought I would be doing something else. And they asked us where we wanted to go, and we picked 3 places. We said, well, if you can send us to Hawaii, Germany, or Asia, I mean, we'll go. And they're like, well, you can go to all 3 places. Just pick whichever one you want. Well, we want to go to Germany. Yeah, I wasn't in Germany. We went for about 2 months, and then I deployed. The deployment was something that I guess we'll never forget, especially when you're 18. And it was just really hard. If you guys have any questions, I'll answer.
Thank you. Okay, our last vet this morning is a new addition to our veterans panel, and we have David Manville who's going to be talking about the global war on terrorism. David.
Good morning, everybody. David Manville, United States Navy veteran. I was a second-class engineman when I got out, which is an E5, and I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, or Great Mistake, Illinois, they call it. When I got there, it was a bunch of kids, and I was already 24 years old, and those kids were knocking out push-ups like you wouldn't believe. So it took me a little bit of time to be able to catch up and meet the demands of boot camp. Close to the graduation of boot camp, some representatives from the United States Navy Presidential Ceremonial Guard came by and were recruiting people that were tall, could lift a lot of weight, and I'm 6'6", and I'm not very small, so I made the cut. And so I flew out to Washington, D.C., and I went through another 3 months of rigorous training, which involves standing still for long periods of time, and making sure that your brass was really shiny and your creases were thin and tight. I did 2 State of the Union addresses while in the ceremonial guard. I did President Bush's inauguration, and I was on President Ronald Reagan's burial party. I was also a casket bearer and buried probably about 150 fallen sailors at Arlington National Cemetery. Well, after that was over, I finally got orders to the fleet. I went to C School first, which was LSD 41 Prop Tech C School, which was a diesel mechanic for a 41 class dock landing ship. So I got stationed on the USS Whidbey Island LSD 41, first in class, first always. They put me in M Division first, which was main propulsion diesels. I was the leading petty officer at the end of my tour I was in charge of 74,000 horsepower, 4 Colt fuel stick PC 2.5 V16 twin turbo, 8,500 horsepower piece at 74,000 horsepower, maximum speed of 24 knots, which is about 29 miles an hour. Then they moved me to A-Gang. A-Gang was a small boat crew. And we deployed October 1st, 2007 to the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Mogadishu, and El. And that's when they were doing the anti-piracy stuff, like the movie and Captain Phillips. We rescued 5 ships. The most notorious that we rescued was called the Golden Nori. It was a benzene tanker that was hijacked and kept for ransom for about 6 months. Like I said, I was part of A-Gang, which is a small boat crew. And my job in the Navy was a diesel mechanic. But when you're in the Navy and you're on a ship, you have plenty more jobs. You're also a firefighter. You're also if the ship gets a hole in it, you have to be able to plug that hole. There are many different jobs that you'll be a part of. So on the small boat crew, since I'm the onboard mechanic, the engineman, the engine compartment was in the back of what we call 11-meter or 7-meter ribs, which is an acronym for rigid hull inflatable boat. On top of that engine is a mount for a 50 cal machine gun. And so as the onboard engineer, if the engine was running fine, I manned the 50 cal machine gun. So between that and rescuing those ships and the living conditions, I can tell you how the Somalian pirates hijacked these ships. Off the coast of Somalia, there is a traffic channel, which is very popular for fishing. And for any mariner, which is a person who works on a ship or a boat at sea, when the Somalian pirates would get in these small white boats, they're called skiffs, and they'd go out into the traffic channel. And the rules of the water is if somebody is waving their hands in distress, you are to stop and help them. And the problem with the big ships, the benzene tankers, the large fishing vessels, they have to drop anchor. And once a ship drops anchor, you can't just pick it up and take off. It's a process to do it. Once the anchor gets dropped, that's when pirates throw up a disposable ladder, and they have RPGs, high-power long-range rifles, and they will board and they will take these maritime ships hostage. Most of these ships aren't equipped with their own weapons. They don't have any protection. They do now, I believe, but they have water hoses, high-pressure water hoses, like a fire main system, 175 psi, and they shoot the water cannons at the boats to try to keep them from boarding the ship. When we boarded that ship, the Golden Nori especially, they were held for 6 months. They didn't have any working sanitation, toilets. They were being fed bowls of rice with little rocks in them. And it just damages your digestive system. And what they do is they hold the ship for ransom. They live in small little camps on the beach, very poor. And that's what they do to try to maintain money for their camp, their tribe. And they were holding it for $2 million ransom. The United States says, okay, well, we'll help out, but it's up to that country to decide whether or not they want us to go on board and help out, or if they just want to pay the money. Well, the Golden Nori, they're from China, I think, and they didn't want to pay. They wanted us to go on board, and so we did. We rescued all the crew except for one who was already dead when we got on board. And then the engines weren't running, and so I had to go down there and get the engines running in order for them to go to Saudi Arabia to go home. So, in 2009, I was honorably discharged, and I came back home. I moved here to Porterville. I enlisted out of Fremont, California, and I decided not to re-enlist because I was gone a lot. I had a family, I was married, and I wanted to be home, and I think I did enough. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
There were quite a few of them, so to figure out just one would take some time. But as I said before, in Korea, I was in the 21st Air Rescue Squadron, and we had H-19 helicopters and SA-16 Albatross, which we could land on sea. And our job was to pick up a downed pilot or severely wounded and get them back out. Every mission was unique, and so I won't really go into that.
Yeah, I have a couple, just two unique things to come up with. I am 80% disabled through the Veterans Administration. One of the reasons is because when I was over in Da Nang at the time, we were unloading the herbicide, which everybody knows as Agent Orange. Well, it just so happened that while we were unloading this, one of the barrels came tumbling down from the hoist, smashed wide open, splattered all over me. And immediately I was taken to the hospital, washed down and everything, but there's no getting over this here. You got it and that's it. So, and the other unique thing was, like I said, and when I was with the Special Forces in electronic warfare, I've seen a lot of stuff. I personally shot a lot of people as a sniper, you know, and that was one of the unique things that was part of my war. So that's all I have, if anybody doesn't have anything else. So.
Thank you. Veteran Maria.
Like everyone, there's several that were unique to us. For me, I guess one of the most important things that I felt we did for the Iraqi people was that as soon as the women were allowed to go to school, we made a mission, we prepared a mission to take supplies, school supplies, desks, anything, and we had a convoy. Of course, we didn't make it safely. We had a few problems en route, but in the end, it was worth it because to see all those children, and especially the little girls who weren't allowed to go to school, finally be able to, that to me was very unique. And another thing that I would honestly say I enjoyed was when the Rangers took over the palace, Dam's Palace. We were able to spend 2 nights there, and we felt for the first time that we were doing something. We had an achievement. We weren't just there wasting time. We were getting something done. And to us, we felt that we were going to come home soon, but we still ended up staying a couple of years longer than that. But I can keep on going with this. I'm just going to pass it over.
Well, Hal took the honor flight back to Washington, D.C. Would you tell us about that?
Oh, that was one. It was fast and wonderful. And when they took us to Washington, we left Bakersfield, flew to Denver, and then got on a plane at Denver, and zoom, we were in not Washington, but Baltimore. That's right close to it. And then had the dinner and night, and then the next day we toured all of the tours, the places there to go to see, especially the World War II memorial meant a lot to me. And I think the one that touched me the most was the Korean War. That was quite a thing. The next day we went and saw the Fort McHenry where the flag was invented, and that was quite an exciting thing. I mean, a unique thing to see what caused the flag to be built and how big it was. The original flag was so big. Back to the World War II, we were sinking. I was with a group of the airplanes, and we sank. I don't know. We had four submarines, I think. That not our ship, but the airplanes did. But we picked up at 2 different times the survivors of the German survivors had them on our ship. Then we transferred them over to the other ship. And that was one thing. But for my personal most unique thing was that I just relieved the watch. I don't know what you think that a sonar is. I send out a ping, and if any echo comes back, well, I've got a hit. Well, I just relieved the watch in the evening, and I was started pinging, and I got this noise, and I rolled over there to see, and it was a torpedo coming at us. And that was the most, and that was scary. And I said, torpedo on our starboard quarter, and the captain immediately went full speed ahead and turned to the port. And I was reading all of these bearings on the torpedo coming. It kept getting louder and louder. And I thought surely it was going to hit us because it was getting louder and louder and louder. And I was so scared that I was holding on to my sonar machine and sort of standing up waiting for it to hit. And the bridge could hear me calling this out, and they could hear it. And a lot of people asked me, what do you think it sounds like? And I said, to me it sounded like a rattlesnake buzzing, you know. And it just barely missed us. They saw it go right back. That was a unique experience. But outside of that, well, I got back home safe. And I want to thank the Navy. During that, I got to see a lot of the world. Casablanca 3 times. And at D-Day, our 3 old 4-stackers are now 3-stackers. We sailed into the Mediterranean, and we couldn't understand. We were not convoying anything, didn't know what it was, and we tied up. All 3 tied up, didn't do anything, just sat there for 5 days. And on the 5th day, well, we took off and started back home again. And we didn't know anything about the D-Day, but going through they got straight to Gibraltar. They had a news on the radio and it was broadcast over the ship, and that's when we first heard of D-Day. So I have any idea why we were there, but I think we were something to make them think we're bringing more ships in or something there. But outside of that, I got home safe. I saw a lot of the world, and I had a wonderful time.
A unique thing that I can remember that I'll probably never forget was the last day of our deployment from 07 to 08. The captain came on the 1MC, which is the intercom that goes throughout the whole ship. The engine room, just to talk between engine rooms, was the 2JB, but the 1MC was ship-wide. And the captain says, all right, we got the call from the Pentagon, we're going home. And all of a sudden, I guess he puts the mic to the radio he was playing. I remember he played Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. And then as we started heading back, he played Mr. Rains in Africa by Toto.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Go ahead, sir.
You said you were Special Forces, a sniper.
Yes, sir.
What weapon did you use, and what was your AO in Vietnam? And please don't tell me it was top secret.
At that time, it was M14 at that time, in which they just came out with the M16 then. Okay, that's what we were using at the time. And
Please don't tell me it was top secret. What AO were you operating in Vietnam?
basically, like we did, like I said, we came in and dropped into the jungle, okay? We would set up hidden thing in the jungle there in the trees and so forth, and we would set up electronics simulating a battle. And I know it's not top secret, but it would bring the enemy in, and we would be set up to basically take them out as they came in. Now, does that answer your question, or?
Somewhat, but what AO, area of operation in Vietnam, did you work in?
Where in Vietnam were you?
Oh, where was I?
As a sniper.
As a sniper, where we were right outside of the C.H.A.P area, right in there. Then we went down into Quang Tao area. I personally have been to all 4 corps. Ship-wise, sea duty-wise, and then Special Forces. So I've been all 4 corps. Also, which the U.S. wasn't supposed to know at the time, went down to Cambodia and also to Laos. So,
What year were you in Vietnam?
my tour of duty was from 1966 to 1971. And I spent, like I said, a year and a half at sea. And then the rest of the 3.5 years was over in Vietnam area. And roughly 3 tours, which I do have stars for each one. It's on my DD-214, the whole bit, everything. It says the whole explanation of it. But if you're familiar with it, there were 4 corps in Vietnam, okay? And the dividing line was basically the Ho Chi Minh Trail between north and south. I've been to all 4 corps down there, didn't spend a whole bunch of time during each one. Sea duty, we were in there at the time loading up ammo, which we carried on the rocket firing ship, 5,000 rockets at a time. And we had just pulled out of there that morning, and if you remember the story, the history, that afternoon, the whole base, hospital, everything was completely blown up. And thank God we weren't there. We had left earlier in the whatever. They did have a bounty out for our ship. We were called the Fire Dragon. And I'll tell you what, it's pretty scary lots of times when you're on a ship and you having these being shot at, having motors being fired at you. You know, it's pretty scary when you hear them landing anywhere about 25, 15 yards away from where you are. And the type of ship we were on, the reason they called it the Fire Dragon was what they called a twin screw type of thing. It was able to maneuver into waters up to 4 to 5 feet. And that's why we went into rivers lots of times and fired from river positions. So, if I have, I hope I could tell you a little bit more, but you know, it's hard. It really is. Don't take it wrong, but I don't like really to talk much about it because I've been told do not talk about it, and the reason is because it brings back bad memories, creates dreams that I don't want to live with and don't want to bear. So that's why I try to keep it to a limit sometimes as to what happened.
Let's go on to something else then. There was another question here up front. Yes, please.
Well, coming back with your disabilities, what obstacles have you occurred while looking for work?
Anybody besides,
Just for the whole panel.
okay, any of you return with disabilities that you sought care? Maria?
Well, I did 10 years in the Army, and I always thought that I wasn't going to be a lifer. Once I was in, I just never thought about getting out, and I had to get out because of it, my knee injury. And my backup, my fail-safe was going to become a cop, but I can't. I couldn't do that, so that's one of the main reasons why I enrolled here in PC. I never went to college. I went straight from high school to Germany. But that was it, my fail-safe. I couldn't do it anymore, so I'm here trying to find a new way, something else, a new career that I would like to go into, something that doesn't involve a lot of physical activity that I just can't do anymore. But it's hard when you have something that you want to do and you can't do it anymore.
Has employees or, while job searching, or has anybody, has the, say for you, when you came back, has anybody not wanted to hire you have you had any injuries?
Oh, I haven't had a no, it's just that I couldn't do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And obviously I wasn't going to be able to go into the academy, so that was going to be a no, we can't take you.
That's a great question. Yeah, when I got out in 2008, I had a really good job. I was a union steam fitter out of San Jose, California. I think a month after, I got laid off because I was the new guy. About 3 months after that, I was homeless. My job in the Navy was big application diesels, Fairbanks Moors, coal fuel sticks, Detroit 8071, 6071s, and there's just not that much of a need for somebody to work on something that big in this area. And so yeah, it's not easy. They say we get veterans preference, but it's not always true. It's horrible.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't emphasize a little bit here about my disabilities. What it has done to me, I have bad hearing. That is 40% of my disability. And the rest of it is I have neuropathy, tendonitis. There are times when I can't even walk. I have to use a cane to get around, and sometimes the cane doesn't even help either. And this is all has to do, what I said earlier, the Agent Orange. I have it in my system, I've been tested for it, and found out that I do have it, and that causes a lot of my disability. This foot right now is swollen a lot more than this one over here. And that's part of the neuropathy that I have to live with, and so forth, so.
If I may, I come back, I returned from the Korea and Vietnam, 22 years service, with no deficiencies, thank God. However, there was a little incident that happened back in Vietnam. I was a crew chief / load master on a C-7A. We fly in and out to any little base camp anywhere in the Central Highlands that needed supplies or needed people evacuated out. So little DAC, a little place in Central Highland there, I got to know these cook, mess hall sergeant. They're pretty good. And he says, I was a sergeant at the time, master sergeant. And he says, Sergeant Tate, can you get me any paint? I said, I'd like to paint my mess hall, as it was. And I says, quite possibly. So a week or so later, we were flying in there again. We knew we were going in, so I had 3 5-gallon buckets of paint. I went in and we took some ground fire. We've been in there 3 times that day, taking ground fire every time in and out. So I would stand up in a little hallway and had communication gear on both sides of it, just so if a bullet came through, it hit that communication gear instead of me. Well, the pilot took a hit right on his windshield. It was about 20 foot off the runway. And he instinctively went like this and just buried us into the runway. I was about this far from a radio console. He slammed me into that, and you've seen the comedy of Tom and Jerry where you got hit with a frying pan. That's what I looked like. But to make a long story short, I traded that 15 gallons of paint for 2 cases of steaks. So when we got back to Phuket that night, I was broken nose, quite a few teeth knocked loose, and these steaks were all thawed out, and so I gave them to my buddies, and they had a big cookout that night. And all I could do was suck some juice up through a straw, and that was it. End of my story, end of my lies.
Mr. Howell, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, this didn't happen with, when I got shore duty after being at sea for near 2 years and more than 2.5 years, I got shore duty, and I was stationed in San Pedro in a radio shop, and one day a new fellow came on board, and he was a first-class radio man, and we had duty together one night, sitting in the shop there, and all of a sudden he just broke down and started crying. And it really gets to you when somebody right next to you starts crying. You don't know did I do something? He says, no, it's something I have to overcome. And he told me he was on a cruiser, and his whole radio shack got a direct hit, and he was the only one that was survived it. And really hit me, and how many people come back with that thought of right next to you, and as your good friends all gone boom like that. That's the thing I can say about that.
Speaking of good friends, do you still keep in touch with any of your comrades in the military?
Mine are all dead. I'm 93 and they all beat me.
Speaking of that, back years ago when I was still active Air Force, I was in a fighter squadron up here at Castle Air Force Base in Atwater. And we have a reunion every year. We deactivated that squadron in 1967. We have a reunion someplace in the United States every year. This last year it was at Wright Pat Air Force Base in Ohio. The coming year it'll be at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. And as you can see, as you can figure out, I'm in my low 80s now, so our attendance in those reunions are dropping out. So, but we continue to go every year as long as we can.
Good for you.
Yeah, you're probably wondering why Navy in 5 years. At the time of war, my tour was 4 years, but I was going to ship over. In other words, re-enlist. And during the time of war, when you get your orders, either you accept them, you don't accept them. Okay? You don't accept them, it's written in black and white here in wartime, you get 1 extra year. And a lot of people don't know that, but that's exactly what happened. I didn't believe it myself until I read it in black and white. So that's why I got the 5 years. They wanted to send me to Hawaii, and I said no. I want PBR duty in Vietnam, which I didn't get. So I got 1 extra year. Yes, I have been in touch with a couple of friends of mine. As a matter of fact, some of you might know one of the judges over in Fresno by the name of I.B. Smith. Judge Smith. I went to basic training and we spent some duty together on sea service. So we, not as much as we used to, but we do keep in touch once in a while. So,
Yes, I keep in contact with mostly everybody that I deployed with, but my first deployment, those are the men that I talk to the most. I guess it's something different about the first deployment. You just don't forget, especially because we were in OIF 2, which we replaced the people that invaded Iraq. So it was a complicated process because it hasn't been done before. They didn't exactly know how the transition was going to work. So as soon as I got there, they transferred me from my aviation unit. It's not a transfer, it's an attachment. And they attached me to a Ranger battalion as their supply specialist. Now, women were not supposed to go work with them or be with them, but there was no other, we were all females. And I was the newest one, so they're like, hey, nice to meet you, goodbye. So they sent me to work with them, and after working with those men, yes, we keep in contact constantly. Whenever they get a vacation, most of them are special forces now. I believe they're in the 7th group. But whenever they get a break, whenever they come home, we try to. Last year we went to Puerto Vallarta, but we went as a trip because one of our friends passed away and he wanted his ashes spread in Puerto Vallarta, so we took him. And whenever they have a chance, they call. Because I'm the only one that's out. Every single one of them remained in.
Yeah, actually, recently I got in touch with an old buddy, Ian 3, Toby Stevens. We were in M Division together down in the main propulsion diesel engine room. They called us pit snipes, and we were really good friends while we were in. And we had the same watch schedule, so we were always working together and on watch together. I was main space monitor, he was LOS monitor. So I read all the readings on the engines, on the sides and the inside, and he worked on a local operating station. And it was weird, he asked me to be his friend on Facebook, and it didn't say EN3 no more, it just said Toby Stevens, and I was trying to put a face to the name. And I'm used to seeing him, Engineman 3rd Class Stevens, I didn't even know his first name. So I've been talking to him. He lives in Colorado. He's very active in his church, and he's got a job working for Ford. And so I'm really happy for him. He's doing great.
Well, if it helps you. do you think that the memorial that was built for the World War II veterans is one that you think was appropriate, and why?
Well, there was so many people who were casualties in World War II, and it's very appropriate.
Can you describe it a little bit?
Well, it's in a big oval section. You walk in around it. It's got each war, an area around, and each state has a sort of section in it. That's pretty hard to describe off the top of my head. One memorial here in Porterville is that memorial there by the high school.
The
Big,
helicopter?
there's all the people that names on there that died in World War II. And that affects me very much because about 3/4 of them were very good friends of mine. I read that and bring tears to my eyes. So,
Back to the memorials, I have been to Washington DC numerous times, and every time I go, I spend time at Arlington Cemetery, all the war memorials. The World War II memorial, I've seen it twice. There is, I think, 47, 48 pillars out there in an oval shape, as he explained. Very beautiful and humble. It's humbling. Also, the Korean War Memorial, the Vietnam War Memorial, and I think there's some new ones going up now. I'm not sure exactly what they are. But it's, if you're ever in that area, don't pass up the chance to see these memorials, all the way from the Lincoln Memorial straight on down to the White House.
Well, most of you know the memorial I'm going to talk about. It's the Vietnam Memorial Wall. The traveling wall, I have taken part in that. I'm the Vice President of the American Legion Riders here in Porterville, and we try to make as many of those traveling walls as possible. And it's very touching. It brings tears to my eyes when I go and see that thing every time. I have not been able to have the chance to see the main one in Washington, D.C., which I do hope to someday be able to do that. But as of now, I have not. There is also another memorial that is going around now that I took part in. It's called the Traveling 9/11. It has all the names of the veterans that were killed in 9/11. It's a wall memorizing these people and the plane crashes and the things that were killed in that and everything. That's a very interesting wall, and I know probably a lot of people haven't seen that one yet, but it is going around. I met it in Bakersfield, brought it all the way in, met it up at the Grapevine, and we brought it all the way into Bakersfield. And it's not as big, it fits in a small semi, one trailer deal, but it's building. They're going further and further on it as of what's happening right now in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so forth. All these names are being added onto it. So those are the two memorials that I have been associated with. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add to that? Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
Well, just in light of that, and I also wanted to say, I appreciated your question about the honor flight, because I'm Mr. Howell's daughter, and I accompanied him on the honor flight, and I actually brought this scrapbook. So if anybody's interested, there are a lot of pictures of the memorials. But I also wanted to really stress, if any of you have grandparents or friends that would be eligible for the honor flight, because for the veteran, it is a free trip back there. And it's not just a trip of being able to go back and seeing it. The honor that they receive the whole way, I can't even explain to you. It is such an incredible experience for these veterans. And right now they're focusing on World War II because, of course, so many are now passing away every day. But they are starting to take and go into Korea, and especially if they're disabled, and probably even Vietnam. So please look into it. We went through the Kern County honor flight at Bakersfield, but right after that was when they formed the Fresno Central California one. And so there are really two different organizations that are doing it in this local area. And really, if you have anyone interested, I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards and share the scrapbook. But It's an incredible experience, and I just really want to stress that, and if anyone can make that happen for any of your relatives.
Thank you, Denise.
Carol, just like one more.
Okay, one more question.
Okay.
We're out of time.
For Mr. Denver Tate, my grandfather was is a Korean War veteran, and from time to time we kind of BS about, you know, the experiences and whatnot. I wanted to ask you. He refers to the women over there as very, very nice, and he says with the possibility of having a aunt or an uncle over there. What say you about your experiences over there with
Make it brief.
That's an unfair question.
Boy, that's, yeah.
No comment.